Harvard President Claudine Gay seems safer now as efforts to get her fired haven't worked yet. Following a contentious hearing over anti-Semitism, she was accused by conservative commentator Chris Rufo of plagiarizing sections of her PhD dissertation. Washington Free Beacon reporter Aaron Sabarium claimed he found even more evidence, posting a thread on X yesterday saying Rufo's example is just the tip of the iceberg. In 4 articles published between 1993 and 2017, including her dissertation, Gay paraphrased or quoted almost 20 authors without proper attribution, in some cases lifting entire paragraphs verbatim. Rufo continued to criticize Gay over the alleged plagiarism, tweeting her statement and adding, Harvard President Claudine Gay responds to the plagiarism scandal by telling the Boston Globe that she, quote, stands by the integrity of scholarship. Note that she did not specifically deny the allegation of plagiarism, nor explain repeated violations of Harvard's own written academic integrity policies. Bottom line, Gay's work clearly violates Harvard's own standards. This scandal is not going away. Nevertheless, Harvard appears to be standing by Gay as the Harvard Alumni Association Executive Committee expressed its unanimous support for Harvard President Claudine Gay and asked the university's governing board to publicly back Gay in a letter sent on Monday. So this is continuing. We discussed this yesterday. So there seems to be, there's not acknowledgement by her that she did anything wrong, but the Harvard Crimson, I see now, has reviewed the passages and say that some do appear to violate Harvard's current policies around plagiarism and academic integrity. That's the student newspaper, obviously. Sabarium says he spoke with several experts who agreed that she should have done more work here. Look, there is a difference. We talked about this yesterday. But there's a difference between like plagiarism, and what might be considered like lazy plagiarism, where you just don't do a good enough job, rewording the phrases that you're citing. This is clearly more of that case than the former. Still, I think it says something about the state of academic institutions that you can rise to the very top to be president of Harvard while committing these very basic errors that violate Harvard's stated policies. And you said, you talked yesterday about, well, should we review everybody? And I'm sure if we reviewed everybody, we would find tons more examples of this. I don't think she's like some outlier in terms of this. I think it speaks to the lack of seriousness within our academic institutions. That's interesting.
I think it speaks to the fact that most graders don't catch everything, especially in an era before computer software. I suspect that without that computer software, Christopher Rufo never would have seen these things, and that we have a skewed expectation of how scholarship has always been done. And I think it might be a useful exercise to use the computer software, ChatGPT, that we have now to review everything, and maybe that will cause us to have perhaps a little bit more of a sympathetic view to some of the things we're catching now with younger students. I have, like I mentioned yesterday, I have teacher friends who are really struggling with what to do right now with grading, which has become so much harder because software is being used, AI is being used to write stuff, but also when you use AI to check stuff, you're finding a lot more hits than you used to, and what are you going to do, fail the whole class, or do different standards need to be promulgated, or do you have to do all in-class essays? So this is a bigger conversation that I think should be had about how we do academia now that we have different kind of tools at our disposal and what we are actually trying to get out of college and what people should be learning. But I really don't think that we can have this conversation without a conversation about what is clearly an effort to cancel college professors because some people disagree with speech they're making specifically about the issue of Israel-Palestine.
Well, but wait a minute. I mean, we're really not talking in this conversation even about the content. I mean, what she's being flagged for has nothing to do with Israel-Palestine and the speech in question.
Indeed. And yet, Christopher Rufo has made a decision to investigate her specific thesis for pretty obvious stated reasons. And so are we falling for the trap of having a conversation about a 30-year-old award-winning graduate thesis instead of having a conversation about a long-term effort to cancel, deprioritize, silence speech on college campuses that is critical of Israel? I mean, Glenn Greenwald pointed this out, and he's been really firm on this. He tweeted recently that before October 7th, Penn's billionaire donors were enraged with Liz McGill, the Penn dean who was forced to step down actually, were enraged with Liz McGill, hired in 2022, because she refused to cancel an event for Palestinian writers, citing free speech. Some on the right are cheering censorship, but they're battling wokeness, thinking they're battling wokeness, when in fact they aren't. And he goes on to document a lot of other examples that preceded October 7th, that there has been a long-standing effort to cancel Palestinian voices on college campuses, to try to bully professors and deans out of allowing Palestinian voices to have the same presence on university campuses as pro-Israel Zionist voices do, and that this is part and parcel of that effort.
But this is not what they've gotten her on. What they've got, you described the thesis as award-winning. I mean, that is it's an award-winning document that contains violations of Harvard's own policy on plagiarism. So that that's a serious. It's not. I'm sorry, she's not being canceled. She's being no more than a Harvard student who, copies their friend's test and gets disciplined and suspended is being canceled. It's not about the content of the speech. It's about following the rules that are exist in academic institutions of integrity and making sure the person in charge of making those rules is also capable of following them. How is it the case that she's been celebrated and awarded through her career, and at the same time making very basic errors that we're just supposed to excuse because she has the correct view on Palestine?
I don't think that you should excuse them, but I think that if you're going to do it, do a comprehensive review of all of the professors. Let me ask you this, Robby. When, Representative Plaskett threatened Matt Taibbi with an investigation by the IRS as he was testifying before Congress about the Twitter files, did that strike you as, did you say, well, if Matt Taibbi didn't do anything wrong with his taxes, then that's not really a threat, and so what's he even upset about? Or did you say a neutral and ostensibly neutral tool is being used to try to coerce him out of speaking truth to power and giving testimony about journalistic endeavors that had revealed a bunch of unflattering things about Twitter and the government and their relationship with each other?
Well, if someone said to her, if a member of Congress threatened to stick the FBI on her for screwing up in her thesis, then yes, of course I would denounce that.
She's not being targeted by. She's not being.
She's being called to account. The same way that this happens. This happens all the time.
How do you not see the similarity here, Robby? How can you not see that? Let me ask you this. Yesterday you said you didn't care about Christopher Rufo's motives, but will you admit, even if you don't think it's relevant, that Christopher Rufo's motives here aren't the pursuit of academic excellence, and that he is specifically focused on Roxane Gay, I keep calling her Roxane Gay, who is actually a journalist and Claudine Gay's cousin, but not the same person. Claudine Gay for the controversy she's embroiled in around Israel-Palestine?
He's a conservative political activist and writer, so I know what he's trying to. He's very open. He speaks openly about targeting the institutions of the left, educational institutions. Mm-hmm. That's something that that's his political project, and I've clashed with him or criticized him in the past when I think he's wrong, but this doesn't appear to be one of those cases. He's identified correct examples of plagiarism in the same way that And this happens to conservatives all the time. This that CNN, the K-File guy who goes and has dug up Republican and conservative commentators, their books, their dissertations, and found examples of plagiarism in them. I don't remember any tears being shed for that project.
I'm just not familiar. I'm not trying to be difficult. I just
common occurrence to go back and look at conservative people who get the slightest bit of attention to look at their book or their work and find exactly these kinds of things and hold them accountable.
Is your argument that politically motivated efforts to...
It's all politically motivated.
Yeah.
So we just have to evaluate the substantive.
Right. And substantively, the argument Glenn Greenwald is making is that if you have framed yourself as a free speech advocate and been complaining for years about the lack of free speech on college campuses, and to turn around and use safetyism and get students from an elite institution to make unsupported, still we're a week out from the conservative hearing, the House Republicans hearing, in which they had a number of students from these institutions talk about their experiences of anti-Semitism on campus, and the one student in particular who made a very serious claim that a professor had said something along the lines of, "You're a dirty Jew," without naming that professor, without substantiating it in any way. They are using safetyism in the exact same way that liberals were accused of being snowflakes and saying that if a black student feels unsafe, we got to shut everything down. I fail to see how that's any different. And it seems obvious to me that Christopher Rufo is using that exact same script that was looked down upon when it was described as wokeness to try to censor speech on college campuses. And just because the other side did it too is not a reason for people with integrity who say they actually care about speech to think that this behavior is okay.
I do care about free speech, and I agree with you generally on what you're saying. I just don't think this is an example of that at all.
So you think that it's just a coincidence that in the middle of a national...
I know that it's not a coincidence. I understand that he has political motives, but what he has uncovered is legitimate, and it would be legit. I mean, they said, Harvard Corporation said they're going to correct it because it should not be done that way.
So what was it done in service of? What was the purpose of Christopher Rufo's inquiry here?
I'm saying that doesn't matter.
If you think it's legitimate and you care about the integrity of academic institutions, then this has to be a much more holistic investigation than just one woman, right?
The integrity of academic institutions, you can't just say, well, in this case, I don't like Christopher Rufo, so this is illegitimate. Or, he's working to some goal I don't support, so we get to ignore this.
Is that what I'm saying? I think I've said today several times and yesterday several times that absolutely do a holistic investigation of all of the theses of professors and perhaps even students using the tools at our disposal we have now, like ChatGPT, to do it more easily than you used to be able to do it. Go ahead and do it. If you're sincerely concerned in academic integrity, that's of course what you would do. If you're not sincerely concerned with academic integrity and it's a witch hunt to cancel speech on campus, you would do what Christopher Rufo's doing.
Okay, and again, when CNN looks through whoever the conservative or like Fox News person with a new book and says, oh, here are some examples of insufficiently clarified or recontextualized remarks, and do we sit and say, well, this is illegitimate because you haven't scanned through every person in this category?
I have no issue with people doing that for Roxane Gay, but I don't think that she should be fired and canceled over it. And you can't really cancel an author in that way that's not firing from the job. They wrote the book. And as we learned from Bethany Mandel, oftentimes having a publicly embarrassing moment can be quite advantageous and lucrative to you. So that's just the way the cookie crumbles. That's just, that's just the media.
My broader point, everybody's motives are political. So we can't say, well, your motive's political, so we're not going to listen to you. But everyone has, in this game, in the game of politics and writing and reporting and activism, they're not neutral actors. Everyone has some kind of agenda. So we have to, rather than try to, that's my view, is that I mostly just have to evaluate what's put on the table rather than why it's being put on the table, because there's always a why.
And I'm saying I'm against I'm for free speech.
Well, I'm for free speech.
So when I see an agenda that's an anti-free speech agenda, I'm going to push back against it. And I'm going to push back against this as a long series of events that have tried to actually constrain the limits of speech on college campuses, and specifically and most notoriously constricting pro-Palestinian advocacy on college campuses.
Yeah, well, I mean, Christopher Rufo's view is not that he is trying to restrict free speech or constrain speech on campus, but rather that diversity and inclusion administrative officials on college campuses are the ones themselves who do most of the restricting of speech. And if we eliminate or reduce those
Claudine Gay is the dean of Harvard. She's not the diversity and inclusion board of Harvard. What does that have to do with Claudine Gay as opposed to any number of other professors?
You're describing his broader project as one targeting speech.
But
he doesn't view it that way.
Right. But if he's really out to get DEI, what does that have to do with Claudine Gay?
What it has to do with it is here are examples of her committing lazy plagiarism that are not acceptable for the president of the organization.
What does that have to do with DEI? Why not go after everyone if you think it's an academic issue, or go after the DEI programs for some specific policy you don't like? What is, looking at the dean of the university, who's obviously under public focus because of her defending Palestinian speech on campus, have to do with DEI? Is it because she's black?
No, it's because she's she's the head administrative figure, and Rufo-type people are dissatisfied with administrative leaders who have allowed this bloat of DEI to fester, which has been used to target speech for the safetyism reasons that you were citing. No, it's not because she's black. It's because her award-winning dissertation contains violations of Harvard's own policy on these things as according to the Crimson and according to Harvard.
She's an economist. What does her economic thesis have to do with DEI? And if there being errors in that thesis have to do with DEI?
Nothing. We're just holding someone who violated Harvard's policy accountable.
All right.
I think she is viewed as a supporter of DEI efforts on
Why?
Harvard and other places.
As opposed to any number of other professors?
No, not as opposed to other, in addition to.
So why not investigate? Why not look
Harvard
for those?
is a representative case as the most influential and elite institution. She's a prominent person at this very elite academic and educational institution that conservatives have grievances with. So she's being targeted, and there's a legitimate...
That's why she's being targeted?
You're saying she's being targeted because she's black.
I'm saying she's being targeted because she was just hoisted up in front of Congress and asked, why won't you condemn genocide? Why won't you condemn genocide with a bunch of other presidents? And now there's been a national effort to get them kicked out of their jobs.
The other two weren't black.
I know.
Yeah,
and
the one who's, I mean, the white one of the white women has lost her job.
Yeah, and the other two haven't been targeted by Christopher Rufo as having academic integrity
Maybe he
issues.
looked through their dissertations and didn't find obvious examples of plagiarism.
I would love to know more about that. Like I said, I support a comprehensive evaluation of whether academic integrity standards are being upheld at U.S. universities. Does Christopher Rufo, or is he using this as a cudgel to advance the kind of speech that he thinks is appropriate on college campuses and cancel and suppress the kind of speech that he does not think is appropriate on college campuses?
Well, I guess we're not disagreeing. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. We can investigate every administrative figure's dissertations and academic work for inconsistencies and violation of policies and punish them accordingly. Don't threaten me with a good time. That sounds wonderful.
I'm sure Christopher
Let's get
Rufo
going.
will be right on that, starting with Alan Dershowitz. All right, we're rising right after this.